Good evening and welcome to the regularly scheduled Tuesday, March 26, 2019 Shelburne Select Board meeting, which I now call to order. The next item is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion to that effect? Moved by Jamie.
Discussion. Oh, wait, never mind, second.
Seconded by Mary. Discussion. Any discussion? Hearing none, seeing no hands. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Colleen is going to call in if she can. At this moment is not present and not voting. The next item is to approve the Select Board meeting minutes of March 12th, our last meeting. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Moved by Mary.
Second.
Seconded by Jamie to approve the minutes. Any discussion?
I have one comment on one change on page 2, item 6, where I commented on the election. I recall saying it was actually a poor turnout, not a good voter turnout. So I would just propose that
We will make that
we
change.
change good to poor or something along those lines.
That's
We
a
will make that
change.
Make that change.
Otherwise, okay.
Okay, with that correction, anything else? Any further comments? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The vote's 4-0. Colleen again, not voting. The next item are public comments, and as is our habit, the first of those will come from the new Library Town Center project, which we're inviting Ruth, John, and or Kathy to do.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ruth Hagerman. I am the Chair of the Library Board of Trustees, and I'm doing Select Board updates. So today we were told by Al that there were 40 subcontractors on site, and when Lee and I went over there, man, there were at least 40 people on site. This is not a linear process. This is definitely a multi-track process. So it was very exciting to be in there and see how each section of the library had somebody doing something different. I don't really have a lot to say about library construction, so I'm hoping over the next couple of months to talk a little bit about what the different spaces are going to be, because I know it's a bigger building than we had, and people are kind of wondering what we're going to do with that space, if that's acceptable. So I wanted to talk tonight about one of the most important components of modern libraries are supporting local businesses, and this is very different. To someone my age, we don't think about that as a library, but that really is a modern 21st century approach to libraries to support local businesses. That includes mostly telecommuters, entrepreneurs. Shelburne has a lot of these people who, before the library was taken down, were coming to the library to use our internet, to use our space, to meet, to get out of the house, to use our specialized knowledge. We have a lot of specialized databases that you cannot access at home on public internet. You have to have a subscription or you come to the library and use it. So the library was full of these people, and I know it was full of these people because I actually telecommute, and I would come over to the library sometimes to get away from the cat, and there was no space. And so I'd have to go back home and play with the cat. So in response to these needs that we recognized early in 2014, we went ahead and included in our space plans a dedicated business center. So we are going to have a dedicated space that has hardware. They will have a lot of plug-in spots for internet. There's going to be a lot of that throughout the building, but there's in one particular area, there's going to be a very high density. We're going to have technology specifically there that people might need that they can't get at home, like printers, specialized printers. We're going to staff it with people that Kevin, you remember a couple weeks ago, you authorized Kevin to apply for a grant to help with staff training, for mentoring and expertise. So we're going to have a dedicated space for business use, and that will be a named space. And then we have a lot of other spaces in the library that I will sort of describe as the spring goes on that people can use for meetings. Some of these are going to be, you can go in and close the door and have a private meeting. Some of it is you might just bump into somebody somewhere and just stand there and talk with them. And the library is also planning a schedule of various networking type events and knowledge-based events. So the library really is taking very seriously its sort of its modern responsibility to support all of our local people who work at home, who telecommute, who are trying to start a business basically in their basement. And we're actually really excited to be offering this to Shelburne as a way to respond to the state's need for supporting these local entrepreneurs by supporting telecommuting. All right, so that's my description of that space. It's going to be up on the second floor. We're real excited about it. It's got some nice windows. So, anybody want to know anything?
Thank you, Ruth.
That's great.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth.
John,
I'd just like to
let folks know,
observe
John,
on the
who you
library
know.
report.
Let the
John
community know who
Saar,
you are.
Harbour Road. I hope all these business people who are going to be using town electricity and town space are going to pay some kind of fee to the taxpayers. Is that in the scheme? Well, I think it should be. What brings me here tonight, in the wake of the U.S. Court of Appeals ruling against the town, I believe the board owes a formal apology to Mr. Wolfson, the CEO of Vermont Rail. What has occurred in this long...
John, with all due respect, you're aware, and others might be as well, that it's our practice and our policy to refer discussions during comments to items that are not on the agenda. This item's on the agenda. There'll be a point at which we will come out and speak to it in one form or another. And I absolutely promise we will turn to you at points to hear your very same commentary. Thank you. Is there any other commentary on items that are not identified in the agenda? Hearing none, seeing no hands. The next item are select board comments.
Have two. One is, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we still need to have a board retreat so that Mike can be properly hazed. Just kidding. We still need a board retreat, and I know we've been having trouble scheduling it, so I would like to recommend that we use a normal meeting for that purpose, if possible. That make it a little bit easier for us to handle it and to think about spaces. Two spaces I can think of might be Kevin's got a meeting room that might be a little too small for us, we might conclude. Although when we were at Vermont Teddy Bear, we were in a space no larger than that. Or the Vineyard, which leads me to my next and final comment, which is I wanted to thank Gail and Ken Albert for hosting the Shelburne Business and Professional Association last night for a meeting where we had a gathering, which I found rather exciting to see all the people who were there, and hope to continue with that. I hope my application to become a member isn't rejected, and I thought the ideas discussed were pretty exciting for moving forward with some greater economic development, and I think we're getting some momentum, which is great.
Mike?
I also want to thank Gail for hosting a talk on Saturday evening as part of Public Philosophy Week. I gave a talk and have hosted a discussion on small town ethics. The week is still going on. There's still something like 38 talks around the Burlington area on a variety of topics. My wife is giving one at the Shelburne Tap House on Thursday on Colorblind Hollywood. And if you're interested, philosophers are very good at talking but not good at advertising. So you have to look hard on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. But it's a really interesting format and a really interesting set of talks. So I wanted to put a little plug in for that.
Thanks, Mike. Jamie?
No comments tonight.
I, too, enjoyed that get-together last night. I thought it was really well, very informative and really kind of exciting. And Gail, you did a marvelous job soliciting input, getting folks talking, and it was kind of the kind of thing you hesitate leaving. Mary, I think, had one of the prize suggestions of the night in discussing the potential of a kayak canoe concession at the town landing. That gives you a little bit of the flavor of how imaginative and forward-thinking people were. But we certainly thank you and Ken and Roz and Jack and everybody involved for making us feel at home. And that was really a great event. Thanks. Any other comment? Hearing none. The next item is to schedule for signing warrants and reviewing accounts, which Peter has made.
Town manager report.
Oh, gee. It wouldn't be a meeting if we didn't forget.
It's all good.
You won't hold it against me, will you?
Not one bit. So the main item I wanted to report back to you on were the CBC memberships, and having reached out to all the chairs and the members. And as you know, we extended everyone's terms by 1 year, and virtually everyone is very happy and willing to serve for another term. We do have a variety of openings present or anticipated. I've advertised on Front Porch Forum, had a number of people expressing interest in any number of committees. So things are moving along well in that arena. Also, with regard to the Stormwater Advisory Committee, everyone is willing to continue serving on that, so we can, when we pick back up and run with that, we'll have that momentum and that shared knowledge.
That's
So
great to hear.
things are looking up on the CBC process. Thank you.
Anything else? Discussion? Hearing none. The next item is to schedule signing warrants and reviewing accounts payable batches, which Peter has introduced in writing to us and will comment briefly on.
One of the responsibilities of the select board is to sign off on all the bills that the town pays, including payroll. That can be done as an agenda item in the meeting, and then the statute's actually been modified to allow for a designated board member to do that outside, so you don't have to take up meeting time to do that. We've opted to do that for the last several years. So the process that we follow is to designate a board member to usually do 2 months in a row of coming in and reviewing the bills that we're paying, signing off on that. And then we also, the statute provides, which we haven't been doing but will be doing, providing copies of all those, a list of all the bills that are paid to the full board. So we've got a list of potential assignments that will take us through this fiscal year. And with the board's approval, we'll go with that. There's basically a primary member that's assigned each month, and then a backup member if that member is not available. So,
Thanks, Peter.
Peter, I couldn't possibly review all of the bills by the end of this month for March, so I'm assuming that we review I would review sometime in April the bills in March. Thank
Right.
you.
Can I ask some questions?
Sure.
My first one is just, what's a warrant exactly? What does that mean?
it's basically a technical name. I'm not sure where it comes from. Basically, it's a sheet that you sign that says you agree that these bills can be paid.
Oh, okay.
Yep,
And
certification.
is there a time, is it at the end of the month?
It's usually up to each board member. Some members will come in each week. We process bills every week. Some would prefer to come in and just do them all at once.
Okay,
So it's totally up to your schedule.
okay, thank you.
Important thing to remember is if you make a mistake, you get billed.
Go, perfect.
Move to approve the proposed schedule for approval of payroll and payables orders as presented.
I second.
Moved by Jamie, seconded by Mary to approve the schedule as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. And it's a 4-0 vote.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Peter. In entering executive session, we will propose and I assume pass 2 motions. We will go out for a period of time, and when we return, we will have something to say to you. Meanwhile, welcome Ann and Dawn, it's good to see you back. We never have enough positions on boards and committees and commissions that are filled, that we aren't always actively recruiting, and we've got both of you well in mind. Thank you. Is there a motion as a first step to enter executive session?
Pursuant to 1 VSA, Section 313, I move to find that premature general public knowledge of the town's legal strategy and pending civil litigation would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Moved by Jamie,
Second.
seconded by Mary. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay.
Pursuant to 1 VSA, Section 313, I move to enter executive session to discuss the town's legal strategy in the matter of Vermont Railway, Inc. versus Town of Shelburne, and to invite the town manager and town attorney to participate.
Moved by Jamie,
Second.
seconded by Mike. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. We will return when we do. Good evening, Claudine. We're going down to the peach room.
Yeah, I think best.
Exit executive session and resume the general session.
So moved.
So moved by Mary,
Second.
seconded by Jamie to exit the executive session. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. Once again, Colleen is not voting for a reason of not being present. Is there a motion?
We just voted, right? To exit?
Now there's a statement.
Is there a statement?
Are you?
Can you make a statement?
No, I'll defer to you to make the motion
Okay.
What motion are we making?
on our next step.
Oh, does that have to, is it an action item? I don't think it needs to be an action.
Does it?
We put that in the form of a statement?
Appropriate.
Yeah.
I think a statement is perfectly adequate.
The statement we are making is that we are not going to pursue appeal of this decision. Any discussion? John,
Can I make my comment?
by all means.
You stole my thunder.
We sort of had that idea earlier,
Yeah.
John.
In the wake of the U.S. Court of Appeal ruling against the town, I believe this board owes a formal apology to Mr. Wolfson, the CEO of Vermont Rail. What has occurred in this long, scatterbrained feud is a blemish on the town's history and a baffling way to waste $500,000. We should do all we can to make it, and by saying we're sorry. That would be a good start. The performance of the town's attorney also warrants more scrutiny. I suggest that there should be a forensic audit of her bills, followed by a request for at least partial reimbursement. I further think that the town should review the standing of the town attorney in view of a record of uniform failure in this regard. I just wanted also to note that we didn't understand while it was going on, but we all know now that Josh Dine served a terribly valuable purpose for the board and for the town by speaking up in the face of hostility from the former chairman of the board. So thank you, Josh. Perhaps because it could, I could think of nothing but waging war against Vermont Rail. The previous board neglected matters that demanded attention. The need for a new fire department headquarters was ignored. It could have been rebuilt on the existing site, except that the board was hell-bent on building a 19th century library. The location of the library meant that the fire station could not be rebuilt on the existing site because there would not be room for them to turn around because of the library. So once again, we're spending close to $500,000 for it. Well, of course, by the time the thing's constructed, it'll be well over $500,000.
John, I think that's a very tenuous connection to the item, to the subject at hand.
I will be finishing very soon. I just wanted to make a further suggestion. The previous board had acclaimed and approved the Rice Lumber project, even though they blasted the hillside and clear-cut the trees. Why couldn't the board at that time talk to Rice Lumber, and make a case for them being public-spirited and helping the town with a new workstation? Now, I mean, they've got exactly what they wanted, and they're charging us an arm and a leg for the new site.
Thank you, John. We appreciate your views, to which you have a perfect right.
Thank you.
I will make a comment on my own, and that is to say that this is not an evening to look back as much and entirely as this is an evening to look forward. That those who work for the town, whether in town staff, those who volunteer for the town, do so in the greater interest of the town, and in this case, the town attorney takes direction from the select board. So if you are busy finding fault, you can well find it with a select board which is elected, and the remedy and corrections for those are at the next election. I don't think we're going to pursue anything like the forensic accounting that you described. And I'll repeat to you that as a personal view, I think this is an evening to draw the curtain and anticipate a new day tomorrow under very different circumstances, given an experience of an issue that for some of us has run now 3+ years. In some of our cases, for all the time we've been on this board. But I appreciate your view. More so, I appreciate your right to express them. And I think in the matter of the fire rescue facility, that's going to have to wait as a set of comments for another day. Thank you, John. Are there any other comments? Linda?
Linda Reel, Falls Road. I applaud your decision not to continue pursuing that litigation. And in the light of moving forward, I would also like to make the suggestion that it's time to review the law firm that represents this town. And I would encourage pursuing a firm that would see to the financial responsibilities here, and also a willingness to work things out amongst people who have differences rather than encouraging lawsuits.
Thank you, Linda. Chris?
Chris Boyd, Thomas Road. So, very glad with the results tonight. Thank you very much for voting the way you did. You're right. We need to put a curtain down on this. But before we put it fully down, there's some things that still need to be addressed from this whole thing. In a lot of respects, I agree with John. Mr. Wolfson and Josh were both treated less than cordially. They should get some sort of written apology. And beyond that, we should be evaluating the 2 ordinances that were rewritten to try and benefit this battle, which were done in a manner that probably took and attacked it from within more than anything else. They did no merit to the arguments for against Vermont Railway. We should be looking at those and either the hazardous materials order or ordinance, either looking at it with the emergency services folks that are in town, and there's a couple other folks that would be willing to help, either looking at rewriting it or the board could simply resend it, because the way it is right now, it's useless. And the truck ordinance that was rewritten, there should be some discussions with the road commissioner, because I'm not certain he's 100% happy with the way it was rewritten. And as far as that goes with PD, it was probably more easily enforced the way it was before. And maybe that's where it needs to be put back to. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah. Well, you make a good point. The omission of which I didn't mean to discount it, but there are lessons learned for all of us. We've all had a great deal of experience with this matter, and I'm sure we all have ideas about how things can be improved. That's why we're here, and yeah, exactly. So no, I think there are lessons learned aplenty here, and one would like to believe that this doesn't repeat. Yeah. Any other discussion, questions?
I have a quick comment, if that's okay, Jerry.
Sure.
I want to respond to the comments about the law firm, speaking as an attorney, so maybe I'm a little defensive on this, but it's tempting to kill the messenger, and you have to remember that a lawyer is acting as an agent for his or her client, and is not the principal and not the decision maker. That's just one thing I want to point out. So firing the law firm isn't necessarily a remedy to the wrong that a lot of people feel, which was the decision making at this table. And the other thing I do want to point out, and Mr. Sarr, this isn't particularly for you, I did review the firm's bills in this regard with the same curiosity. And I do want to say that I walked away feeling like there was nothing wrong with the billing, that there was no overbilling on the part of the law firm. I'm certainly not an auditor, so not an expert in that area, but my own personal review left me satisfied that there was no overbilling. And I also want to remind folks that the appeal was written in very large measure, the appeal anyway, on a pro bono basis, which was a volunteer of time on the part of the law firm. Just so that, to remind people of that.
Can I ask about the quality of the work?
I think that I read the briefs, and I feel like the work was done well, and also the brief was even reviewed by an outside law firm. So, you know, sometimes a lawyer has to deal with the deck she's dealt.
I agree. I think there were two firms working on the appeal, to Mary's point, so there were multiple eyes on the briefing, and
Well,
it
that's
was
very well stated, Mary. That's well stated. The spirit of your remarks, John, we're going to retain. But I think hopefully you'll accept the fact that we're facing forward. Any other questions? Paul, you look like you might have something to say? No? Thank you. Okay, hearing none. The next item is to appoint members to the Fire Rescue Property Site Analysis Steering Committee and to discuss the anticipated process and timeline. I've provided you with a proposal earlier as to the description of such a committee, its purpose, its membership, its conduct. Briefly, this would be a body, a public body acting as advisory to the select board with a membership of 7, those being a representative of the select board, the town manager, representatives of both services, the rescue squad and fire department, and additionally 3 members of the community who bring special skills, experience, and enthusiasm for the project. The job of the committee is to represent the town in the activities that are going to follow this year, which will culminate in some determination of the suitability of the site. Those activities will be largely conducted by contractors, so this will be as much an oversight as not. I recommended that the town manager chair this committee. Among their responsibilities will be to review and approve expenditures. You'll recall that we are spending money on this activity. And to some degree, in anticipation, just simply as a prudent matter, that the purchase, as should the site be determined suitable, and a proposal be formulated to purchase it, and should that be voted on positively at town meeting next March, there would be a time then dedicated to planning and design of the facility. That kind of planning and design would go further than that which is required for permitting, and the committee at that point may well have some role in that future activity. The idea is to put together folks like us who are willing to spend some time and energy making sure this project happens right.
Hi, it is. Hi.
It actually worked.
Good evening, Colleen.
Welcome.
Hi.
And my further proposal was to nominate Kat Collette, who is with us tonight, Chris Boyd, who is also with us, and Doug Merrill, who could not be here tonight. It's up to my colleagues to decide who the representative of the select board ought to be. The other three persons are by nature defined and are here. Chief Jake is here from the rescue squad, and Lee.
Did we name Chris Boyd also? Was he?
Yes.
Okay.
Comments, Mike?
No.
Are you looking for a nomination of a select board member?
It's a no, like I'm supposed to
I'm
understand.
sort of waiting for a volunteer hand, but
I'll volunteer.
seeing no hands.
If somebody wants a volunteer, I would be interested.
Oh, great.
I mean,
Okay.
you know, but I know if you're interested.
No, I am interested, but I can't volunteer because I think a lot of the meetings will be during the day.
Oh, okay.
So
I don't do
Otherwise,
anything
I
during
just
the day.
can't.
I'm a professor.
Yeah.
So.
It may be kind of default, maybe I'm going to be the most useful because there will be a lot of day stuff. But if you, by all means, if you would like to do it, you're on.
I'll do it. I can do it.
Super.
I would be interested in doing it, and I'll
Super.
do my best.
Just wondering if there's anybody else who wants to volunteer from the public, or would that?
These were the only inquiries we had,
Okay.
expressions of interest that we had. There's a point at which one or more someone may change or decide against continuing. I think 7 is on the model of the library Newtown Center Project Steering Committee model, a workable and number. It allows for a large enough number of people to make quorum. On the other hand, it's not a mob, seen at every meeting. And I think the proposal is meant to include all the representation of all the critical constituencies in this project. And I think it's in very good hands with Lee. We've talked to Ruth and Kathy on the library Newtown Center Project Committee, reassuring them that we're not going to just suddenly, Lee is not going to walk away and never come back.
No way.
And then on the other hand, there's been an enormous amount of learning gained from that experience over time. And as that project enters its final phases, it's that experience and knowledge is greatly transferable to this new one. And in that case, Lee's burden is, it just shifted from one hand to the other. It's the same weight. So, yeah, so
Plus
any,
one.
Do we have a name for the committee?
I just said fire rescue
Fire
projects steering,
Facility committee?
yeah, facility committee.
Fire rescue.
Fire
steering committee?
rescue project.
Sound okay?
Make sense, everybody?
Fire rescue project committee. Okay.
Lee, you got some?
I think, as you noted, the Library Town Center project steering committee has worked really well, and I'm confident that the folks who will be involved here will be similarly engaged and helpful for us to work with Healthy Living moving forward to make sure everything happens in a way benefiting the town, and that our interests are clearly represented throughout that process.
It's a public body. For those of you interested, the meetings will be public. And we've advised potential members to familiarize themselves with the ethics ordinance, for starters. And is there any discussion?
Jerry, can you just name the people on the committee again?
It would be the town manager, Mike, the service chiefs, Chris Boyd, Kat Collette, and Doug Merrill.
Okay.
Any questions?
Any
before we
questions from the victims
make
who've been
appointments?
nominated?
Still willing?
Still okay with it? We've left organization up to the chair
We will
and the
allow
committee,
it.
so you will organize yourselves.
Let's just thank everyone for yet more time and effort and commitment to the town.
It's greatly appreciated.
Okay. You ready for a motion?
Yes, please.
Move to appoint the following individuals to the newly created Fire Rescue Project Steering Committee for a term beginning this evening and ending indefinitely upon dissolution of the committee, whenever that may be. The members will be Lee Crone, Chief Jerry Wimette, Chief Jacob Leopold, Catherine Collette, Chris Boyd, Doug Merrill, and Mike Ashew.
Permanent
Moved by Jamie, seconded by Mary. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. Mike, we would expect is abstaining.
I abstain.
And
Colleen voted in favor.
and
I don't know
Colleen,
if you heard her. She voted aye.
Yeah, I.
thank you. Colleen is an aye. So we are all ayes with the exception of Mike, who's an abstain, who's abstained. Go to it. We'll be eager to hear
Thank you.
your first
you all.
report. Yep. Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Next item is the rolling 3-month work plan as presented by the town manager.
So this is another one of the items in the goals and objectives that we had all agreed upon for my work and in concert with the select board. So just giving some highlights over what appear to be the key priorities for the next 3 months. I'll take them in each in order. And of course, we need to add in somewhere in here, I'll get back to you on this, but deciding which of our regular meeting nights will work for the retreat. So clearly the fire rescue property matter that we just launched tonight is a key new issue. The CBC appointments I mentioned, we are in process with that. We'll be bringing some applicants to you over the next 2 meetings. In the meantime, the committees have enough members to operate, but we'll be hopefully appointing some new members very shortly. Stormwater utility, that was a key priority for the board this year. As I mentioned, I've contacted all the members of the original advisory committee. All are willing to serve, and I'll be getting that process back up and running. I've already had one meeting with a few key stakeholders to just try to revisit some of the key concerns that were raised during our hearing and just to brainstorm whether there might be some alternative solutions that all of us can live with. So that's underway. Library Town Center project, of course, will continue through the seasons. Wastewater treatment facilities, we had a briefing on those issues last year. We're looking down the road at some significant expenses, no matter what choice we offer. We'll be bringing some information back to you in late April to revisit the key options, costs and alternatives, pros and cons. And then in late May, we'll be coming back to you looking for a decision on the key question of whether to pursue a partnership with South Burlington. And the reason for that timing is they need to know by June how to handle their own study of upgrade, and do they need to include our flows or just work on their own.
Is that something that we need to vote on as a town? How to do this expensive wastewater upgrade?
Well, ultimately,
Probably
it's
because of bonding.
a municipal facility. There would be a bond involved no matter what
Right.
we're doing.
Right. So if we were to go with South Burlington and the bond didn't pass, what would happen? Do we know?
Well, I presume
That
they
would
would.
be built into the discussion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we wouldn't
Good
commit to
question.
more than the potential outcome of the bond.
Okay,
vote,
yeah, all right, thank you.
Sorry, can I ask Lee?
Sure.
So we have a time frame for letting South Burlington know, but what's the time frame for actually affecting the decision for making this happen?
They're 2 years anyway, it's like 21.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not an emergency in terms of our own facilities about to cease functioning or that we need to decide
Okay.
every aspect.
It's a
But-
long planning tail, and
So there were several, just the very short story, there were several alternatives presented. One was to upgrade both of our treatment plants as they exist. One was to turn one into a pump station and pump it all to the other, or vice versa. Or the fourth option was to pump all of our flows to South Burlington and let them treat it.
Right.
And then our plants would be pump stations, not wastewater treatment facilities. The dramatic costs associated with any of those alternatives, that's
Right.
the big challenge.
So when it says review and analyze anew, are we analyzing anew because there's new options? Or are we?
No, just really reviewing them for
Okay.
everyone's
from
benefit.
last year.
Okay, all right,
It's not a fresh analysis, but
thank you.
matters of the town treasurer, we may or may not have a transition in that position and how to handle that going forward. That's an internal conversation at this point and will become something for all of us this spring. Delinquent taxes, as I had mentioned at the last meeting, I've started to take some proactive approaches with those with the greatest numbers, and most owed to the town. I've made contacts with all of them, the top 12, if you will. I've had responses from several of them, meeting with one on Friday. Several have started to make arrangements for payment plans. They're not going to get us very far in the short run, but at least we've got people realizing that these are debts that they have to figure out how to make good on. Not everyone's in a position, of course, to pay it all at once, but we're reaching out to them, and I will be taking some next steps as necessary or appropriate.
Lee, does the town have I think the town
I was
doesn't,
just going to ask Peter about
does the town have a policy for collecting delinquent taxes? I noted that some of them are very delinquent
Yes.
and certainly haven't accrued in the last year.
No, most of them are long-running, and that's why when I started, because every month we send a letter to everyone who owes any amount of taxes, and I started looking at those and felt, wait a second here, we can't just keep sending a letter every month. I'm not aware that significant effort's been made in the past, which doesn't answer your question of is there a formal policy,
Yeah.
but it just seemed prudent that we start taking steps to work with those homeowners or landowners.
Does the town even have a tax collector?
That would be
Yours truly.
Different hat.
depending on how you read the phrase. It's called the delinquent tax collector, and depending which emphasis you put on which
Yeah.
word, it can be
Yeah.
amusing or helpful.
But we don't have the formal policy, do we? We don't have a formal policy which sets out notification periods, the 18 months to do this, and culminates in the tax sale. And I think that's something we, as a matter of prudence, absolutely should have. It's a shelf item. We've talked about it.
Does that fall under the purview of the town manager or the select board? to do
That would
such a-
be his to propose to us, and we enact.
Okay.
Well, because I heard a story that someone said that they didn't pay their taxes in Shelburne because it was cheaper than borrowing the money to pay the taxes. And they were sort of using it as this was a while ago, though, before the late fee. I mean, the late fee it hasn't been around all that long, I guess, based on stories. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, anyway.
it's fairly traditional. Under statute, towns can, hit people with up to an 8% penalty immediately, and then 1.5% thereafter. Shelburne has decided to go with a 5% penalty and the 1.5%, which keeps adding up. Some people, of course, may be in personal or financial difficulties and get behind. Others may feel like they'll just hold off until they sell the property and let it get settled at that time. But in the meantime, the reason it felt important was everyone else is paying their taxes. The services don't stop happening just because of the taxes. We don't lift the plow. The fire department still comes if you have an incident. Police come, rescue comes.
Yeah.
So it just seemed like some steps needed to be taken.
We just want to be sure we have the legal authority
Oh,
to
yes.
pursue it to a conclusion.
Do you have the authority to make arrangements where you reduce some of the penalties in order to incentivize repayment?
I don't believe so.
That would come
And
to
that
us.
would certainly be a disincentive to everyone else.
Wouldn't that come to the Board of Abatement?
I mean, there are other ways. If your house burns down, you can apply to the Board of Abatement to get your taxes reduced until you can rebuild, because now the house isn't there.
Right.
And relief from certain fees comes to us, so there's an appellate path for most of that.
Right.
I would think VLCT has a policy we can just pull
Yeah,
off the
different
shelf or
towns
Essex, right,
Handle
some other
those
towns.
different ways.
We should.
So anyway, that
on the
process
radar.
will continue.
Good.
Local Emergency Operations Plan, that's primarily an internal staff volunteer level matter, but we'll be coming to you in the next month to adopt that as required every year. Making steps forward to fill the administrative position in the manager's office. I've already actually spoken with one person, and we'll be advertising that position very shortly.
Does that advertisement come before spring, or?
That will come in the next few weeks at the latest. Yes. Depends when spring comes, I suppose, but
Well, that's why I was,
it's coming very
that's why I was
shortly.
giving you some
Thank
punching
you.
room.
It's coming very shortly.
Maybe we
I
won't
assure
get
you.
spring until you fill the position.
Well, then
Maybe
I'm
you
gonna.
should fill it soon.
I'm working on it. Thank you. So come the month of May, again, the library, town center, and fire rescue property issues will both continue. The wastewater treatment facility matter will come back to you. Stormwater continuing. Energy conservation initiative, I know that's on the agenda for tonight. That's also one of the goals and objectives the board set forth for me, and I'm already putting some thought and energy into that. Be collaborating with Paul Goodrich and others on some of the bike ped improvements that have been discussed that are funded in this year's budget and that need to happen this
Is
spring.
this the traffic safety?
That's
Yeah.
the traffic
Okay,
safety
good.
matters,
Yeah,
yes.
that's good.
So line striping, some other improvements on Falls Road that we're committed to happening this year.
Did we
They-
talk about a stop sign? Sorry to interrupt. Didn't we talk about a stop sign that would be a three-way stop between Church and Falls Road? I remember having that discussion.
Yes, actually,
still
Paul
on?
suggested that, and the village safety group was all in favor of it. Unfortunately, even something seemingly as simple as putting up a stop sign is very complicated under state and federal law. So you actually have to do an analysis for another form of warrant, just like with traffic signals, to prove that there's a safety need for a stop sign. You can't put up a stop sign just to slow traffic. So I've arranged, I'm hoping, with the Regional Planning Commission to have some interns come out this spring and summer, do the counts that are needed to see if there is sufficient pedestrian traffic to warrant an additional stop sign or stop signs.
And we are going to address the Falls Road
Yes,
proximity of walking, of
to the extent that's
sidewalk to-
reasonable and
yeah,
possible.
to pavement, but at least as a temporary
So,
measure as soon as weather,
yep. So moving right along through June, you've tasked me with starting to help launch an economic or community development initiative. And again, we'll be collaborating with SBPA and others to help move some things forward in that arena. And then continued work, stormwater, the property issues. You've also tasked me with a town facility maintenance capital improvement analysis of all of our facilities. So that will launch in June. And then, of course, all the regular work that comes with running a town. So these are not the only issues that one has the pleasure of working on.
You mean there's more?
There's a lot of regular work that happens too. I'm sure people are quite aware of that. So that's a highlight of the key issues and priorities that we've laid out for ourselves that we'll be addressing over the next 3 months.
Thank you, Lee.
Hope that's
Mike?
helpful.
Question?
No questions from me.
No questions?
Mary? Colleen?
No questions.
Jamie?
No, it's a good list.
Yeah, I think this has been we initiated this, Mike, on a regular basis and like a tickler. And of course it gets adjusted, given external events and opportunities, but I think this is really helpful for us, Lee. And,
Good.
And hopefully is, functions the same way for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion in the public? Hearing none. The next item is the Energy Conservation and Economic Development Initiative discussion of organization. And Lee is going to pass out to you a brief piece that I did
Earlier today?
on economic development today.
Right.
Now, I'll admit to some strong feeling that we need to get going. And what I'm proposing is that we specify 2 or 3, I suggested 3, but there could be fewer or not too many more actions that we potentially could take that seem to be representative of the needs that we keep hearing about, even up to through last night. Those were to promote sustainable visitation. I'm not sure that we haven't reached the point where we need to talk about tourism in a voice louder than a whisper. It's an economic driver of some great significance in Shelburne, and the best way to guard against its abusive consequences is to control it at the start and provide for it in a positive, productive way, and it seems to be the business community that's involved in that would probably greatly value that emphasis on our part. The other is to initiate regulatory review. Regulatory review would be an exercise in what on the parts of those who are most affected by regulation, that is, people who have attempted or wish to attempt to form a business or situated here, have experienced in the way of what they may feel were too discouraging or too restrictive or too variable requirements, if any, and I think that would probably be a very useful exercise. And the other is to explore tax-related incentivization of business starts and expansion. That's a thought that was introduced in a different form in the town plan, that is, using the town's economic strength, which is considerable, to potentially arrive at some means of providing tax incentivized support to either business starts or to expansion. We're going to be in a position, we will find, I think, of not being able to take advantage of a lot of federal and state grant programs along those same lines, because we are ineligible largely for those based on our economic condition, which is not distressed. These seem to me, my proposal to you is, after all has been said and written, the bottom line questions are these. Should the town, as a matter of policy, take active steps at economic development? If so, which now? And if so, how should it organize to do so? And then went on to propose several choices of how best to organize these efforts. The first, which would be led by the town manager, would be by a volunteer group of those who are most affected by them and most expert in them, who we would ask to come back to us with specific actions the town could take by a report to us in July. We're recognizing that some of these may require funding that we have not anticipated, have not budgeted. Some of these may require energies and resources that we can't afford. But the idea would be to ask folks to come back and say, here's what you need to do. Here are 3 or 4 things you need to do that would be the most helpful things you could do. The second choice is a similar mix of volunteers, including representatives from the CVCs, the Shelburne Business Association, community-based businesses and institutions, such as the farms, which are mainstay economic actors in our environment. In that case, to take some additional time and step to convene roundtable discussions, maybe issue community surveys, try to gather even some further opinion on what priority actions we should take, and anticipate that by mid-August. And the third choice is even more extended, in which case we would again turn to a volunteer group acting in an advisory capacity to us, that they would we would encourage them, perhaps with the benefit of consultation with a professional resource, to take formal steps such as charrette. Some of you are familiar with those steps that were taken in development of the library project, as well as the Route 7 South project. It's a fairly standard set of procedures. The idea here, I think, is that we need to do something, and we need to do it now. I think the questions of what we need to do are answerable, and when we get them in front of us, I think all of us can spend some time profitably discussing those things. There may not be as much as we need that we need to do that we can, but I think we need to move the discussion forward. And that's what I've put in front of you.
Mr. Chairman, I also note that on the agenda as part of this piece is also energy conservation. That, as you know, has been a particular interest of mine, and I wanted to get it included, so thank you, on the agenda for today. I had an brief exchange with Jamie about how to manage that piece, and if you don't mind, what I'd like to say is that I know there's at least one member of the public here tonight, Megan McBride, who I've had exchanges with, who's very interested in helping in that process. She brings experience from Washington, D.C. On this particular topic and has some ideas. I don't know, Megan, if you want to share them this evening, but I do know that Jamie had the idea of sort of making a subcommittee of the Planning Commission to focus on these issues. Megan's ideas are quite sophisticated and I would say kind of big, but exciting and challenging. I'd love to hear them if you'll indulge that idea, if you're willing to share. Yeah, if it has to be at the chairman's pleasure, but if he's willing to hear.
No, the only scene setter is we also had we wanted to discuss energy conservation.
Yeah.
They're sort of parallel, and
Thank
this
you.
is simply the economic development part. There's more planning narrative to energy conservation potentially than economic development, and golly, we're glad to have you and interested to hear what.
You'd have to come to the microphone. Thanks.
Sure. So I'm Megan McBride from Marset Road, and I didn't prepare a presentation for tonight, but essentially I've been thinking about ways that the town can work to reduce our carbon footprint. What can we do to cut down on what we're doing environmentally in a way that can also help the town economically? So there are a lot of interesting options. There are towns, I've been talking a little bit with folks on energy committees in other towns across the state, and I think there's some really interesting things going on. So I had been thinking about ways that we could use solar energy, get some solar energy up in the town, and use the cost savings to help fund other sustainability initiatives in Shelburne. So how can we do that here? And also maybe as part of a larger effort to, I don't know if you want me to go into
No, that's fine. So
too far,
It's
but
just
to
when we
help
get somebody to the
across the
microphone,
state.
we usually ask them to then also volunteer. It's sort of a rope and dope.
So thank you for
So you told me that.
She didn't tell you that?
It's a setup.
So,
Yeah.
and this has been something that I've thought about too, but not on such a large scale. And of course, I don't have the background that Megan has. I think that there might be room for actually a solar field in Shelburne. There's, if we can get it passed, I've talked to the folks at Sun Common, and they said to me that it's harder now in Vermont to get solar fields done because any neighbor could easily object, and then if you're on a wetland, it makes it hard too. But there is former farmland that's owned by the town that's to the west of the Shelburne Athletic Field House and to the north of the housing cooperative on Harbor Road. And it's near a transmission line as well, so that would be, if it could get permitted, an ideal place for there to be solar on town land. So that's the kind of thing I think that Megan would like to pursue as well. So this is, in my mind, as stewards of the town, it's an obligation of ours to reduce our $250,000 a year electric bill. Part of that could change if when our wastewater treatment plant changes, because that's our biggest or energy hog, if you will, because we have 2 plants, and we have 2 plants by historical accident because there used to be 2 fire districts in this area. So hopefully that will change if we end up in South Burlington, help reduce. As you may know, Megan, because we talked, and as Ruth and Kathy can say, the library is going to have some solar, but I don't think that's going to help the town per se. It's going to reduce the library's costs.
No, it actually is also going to pay town utility bills.
Good.
Yeah, because we're going to be off-takers of a significant amount of power that are up to the allowable limit in state statute.
Great.
So we'll be buying at least 500 kilowatts of solar
At a
energy.
reduced rate.
At a 12% discount for
Right.
25 years. So.
Right. So there's those things. So the current thinking, at least after my very brief exchange with Jamie, is that we create an energy subcommittee of the Planning Commission, and if there's appetite for that, I'd love to see that happen tonight. It is noted on our agenda as an action item, although hasn't been a lot of discussion beforehand. So certainly understand if people aren't willing to do that. But I wanted to get it on the table right away because Megan came at 7, and I know I wanted to introduce her to folks and to let people know that there's somebody in our community willing to help out and has some great ideas. So thanks for coming tonight, Megan.
Thank you.
So the good news is that we already have the subcommittee formed. So
Great.
there's already an existing energy subcommittee of the Planning Commission that's been together for over a year at this point and helped really inform the energy section of the new town plan, which in my mind should sort of be the roadmap for whatever we're trying to do here, including solar. I know a number of the recommended actions speak to solar, so I think we should just enlist new horsepower like yourself, Megan, and put the word out there. I don't know if the existing group, which has sort of finished its work product because the plan was just adopted, is still interested in moving it forward, but maybe it's just sort of reconnecting with that committee and the Planning Commission. I know you're speaking with them on Thursday, and Lee is as well, so that might be a good agenda topic to bring to their attention.
Good
Is
point.
how do we repurpose this
Yep.
existing energy subcommittee, and would they be interested in sort of
Actual
really getting involved?
implementation.
Exactly, implementation, rolling
Yep.
up the sleeves and getting after some of these recommended actions, which have already been articulated in the plan.
Yeah, I think the difference is in energy terms, there's more substantive recommendation in the plan than there is economic development. And it addresses both production and use. So often alternative energy production is treated and discussed separately from use, but we're anticipating everything from idling time in town vehicles to alternate sources of production. And that's a wealth of opportunity. So I don't by any means envy you the the job of organizing that, distilling it, reducing it to actionable items, things we can actually do in specific terms in a fairly reduced period of time. But I think, as you note, there's an awful lot of understanding of research and resources out there and examples, beginning with the farms, their installation, which was early in the game, and which at one point we went and visited. So I'd be happy to if you would allow us maybe an opportunity next meeting, if you'd be willing to come back and share with you some ideas about specifically what you're going to address and in kind of what order, so we have some expectation and some understanding of where to guide resources to you. The problem is, it's just an awful lot of things that can be done. And rather than continue talking about them, I think you may have picked up already tonight, my sense is we should be starting to do something about them. So
Perhaps I can make an email introduction between Megan and Lee and the Energy Subcommittee.
Exactly. I'm sure you know a number of them too.
Yeah.
They're all familiar faces.
Yeah.
So
maybe
it'd
there'd
be
be an
great
opportunity Thursday night for them to, to take it a few steps, organizational steps further. And are they all members of the Planning Commission?
They're a subcommittee of the Planning Commission,
Yeah.
so
they're all,
they're
they may
still
be there.
intact as far as I know.
Jason is, no.
Neil
Who's the
Curtis,
chair?
who we just appointed.
Yeah, and then,
was
but
on
who's
the-
the chair? Because he
Oh.
was too. Who's the chair of the planning? James.
Jason is still the chair of the
I
Planning
think he's
Commission.
on the committee too, though.
He might actually
Yeah,
sit on it.
yeah,
Yeah, he's
yeah.
an
Yeah.
energy.
All right, so that's a
Guru
starting
himself.
point.
Very good.
And
So
makes
I'll make
sense?
those introductions, Megan.
Thanks
Makes
for coming
sense?
out, Megan.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we thank you very much. We're glad you're willing to serve us.
So turning back to the economic development discussion, are we trying to reach some consensus on
I just wanted to-
organization at this point, or how do we want to progress this discussion?
I just thought there were good, you sort of presented these as exclusionary choices, but I mean, I thought we could combine bits and pieces of all of this. I mean, one thing I would be interested in is a professional assessment of what would be the best kinds of, I know that, we don't have necessarily the money to put in for a big study. I'd like to know, have there been studies in the past of economic development issues in Shelburne? Do we have any data on what kinds of steps would be the most efficient and effective? Do we know these sorts of things, or? So I'd be interested in a professional's assessment.
I mean, one of the first tenets of economic development is that the easiest businesses to attract are to help keep the ones you already have. And a lot of that means reaching out to business owners, which I'm starting to do this Friday, just to talk with folks and find out what works for them, what doesn't. Are there things the town can do to help? The town can't always solve everyone's problems, but there may be things that we could do that we're not aware of because we haven't reached out. Jerry and I heard from one long-standing business owner who said, no one from the town's ever come out just to talk with me about things. So I said, great, because I was thinking about doing that. So it's not just about me, but it's about the town reaching out and asking those who are already here, what works for you, what doesn't, who do you know? Are there other complementary businesses that we might be looking to? So it's not just a random thing thinking we're going to suddenly attract new people to come to Shelburne as compared to many other places, but how can we leverage the energy and the investment that people have already made? That's usually the first best step.
But that,
And then from there,
that data,
she must have had an ER call.
Yeah.
So then from those conversations,
hopefully
you
that's
start making
informing,
next steps.
right,
Reaching out
actions
to
or something
realtors, reaching out
specific.
to business
Right.
owners, and then
My concern is that economic development is local. There's an awful lot of institutional knowledge and approaches, many of which require staffing or consultation or anticipate it, which at the moment we don't have and possibly are unlikely to have in the near term any full-time equivalent staff person. So conventional economic development is probably not a model we're going to be able to follow. My sense is that we have folks who live every day with feelings about how the business climate in Shelburne can be improved as a matter of business. So it's not abstract. And I think we can tap them for a series of ideas, some of which may be doable, some of which may not, which allows us to sit here and talk about some specifics rather than generalizations. The town plan is not specific about economic development. Tourism, as I read, it's not even mentioned. And that's a very generous portion of our current contemporary economic life, and it may well be a very important portion of our future life. So I think it's time we enlist the help of principally those who are living the problem, as well as the opportunities. There are people who have very good things to say about business in Shelburne. I don't mean to minimize that. And the creative economy, the artisan economy that Ruth was referring to is a very large portion of it, and still virtually under the radar in a sense. My sense is we know enough to be able to convene or impanel a group, and these are graded in terms of the length of time spent and the width of the circle to find out more and more information from local persons about what they think the priorities are. And my sense is we know enough to know we need to be taking some action, and I'm proposing that we start doing it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would echo Mike's comment that we need better data. Here we had an old survey that I mentioned at a previous meeting, and it clearly was not well received by the business community. So I think we just need a little bit of professional horsepower to find dollars in the budget somehow that we can convert towards, whether it's a consulting arrangement for a one-day charrette, a half-day charrette, whatever it is, just to really get some better data. Yes.
Hey.
The survey you're talking about, which one are you referring to?
I was referring to Ann Hogan's survey from several years back.
It wasn't well received by the business community?
I don't think it was that well received. I think it was extensive and the outreach was pretty good, but some of the feedback that I received was that it really didn't quite deliver on what it was trying to do. So I don't know if you heard otherwise, but that's just...
And it may not have meant to inform the problem in the way that we're now discussing it.
Yeah, I think that it's like that it was trying to achieve. I thought that it did a pretty good job. I mean, I think like publicly saying that it wasn't received by the business community, I think would be a surprise to some.
Well, I guess
I didn't know if you were talking about a different survey or not.
No, I'm talking about the same survey. I should say it was received by some as inadequate, maybe is a better way to say it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't universally well received.
Like everything.
Like everything,
There's always
sure.
going to be some that don't like
Of
it.
course, yeah, no, and it was extensive, so.
How about we blend the first and second choices, and that was a deliberate gradation.
Well, I guess my concern is that I've been hearing, and I'm trying to get up to speed on the problems of economic development, and it's obviously not an area that I would have a lot of experience in. But I've been hearing this problem since I've been in Shelburne. This has been something I've heard about, and I'm concerned that we'll yet again launch an effort. I mean, we need to deliver, right? So we need to find some actionable material solutions, and I want to make sure that we don't just offer a lot of inspiration, but actually have some concrete steps that we are reasonably certain will deliver the kinds of results we want to get.
No, I think in both cases, this is we've reached a point of serious turn. That we really mean this, and I put it in policy terms. There's no operative policy in Shelburne regarding business environment. There's no operative policy regarding energy use and production. mean,
As
these,
distinguished from the town plan, which address both.
that's correct, which has a series of objectives and recommendations. And in the case of economic development, they're pretty spare, and they largely regard the sustainable treatment of the environment. So, which a town plan would. It's protective of the natural resources, and that would be its major premise. But on an item like, what does it take for a person who wishes to open up an addition X to a business Y in Shelburne, and should it take that long and be that complicated and expensive? What's our answer? We don't know. We don't have any idea. We've never discussed it. We don't have a clue what the process is. We may be doing precisely what we should do in support, but there may be possibilities to improve it, to reduce the time, to reduce the complication, to reduce the uncertainty, so on and so forth. Just as an example, Mary made a fantastic suggestion last night. She said, maybe we should be thinking about, this is a little change of subject, but it's meant well in a minute, you'll hear. She said, why don't we think about a concession that rents kayaks and canoes at the town landing? Hey, I mean, to me, that's an enlightening, idea. And then a gentleman who's a business owner in town described for us his experience, in which case people came from out of town, well out of town, out of country, went to the bay, unloaded their kayak, came up to La Platte, to the landing on the other side of the bridge that we're familiar with, beached it, walked uptown to their business, did their business, and then walked back, kayaked back to and motored back to Canada. I mean, that visitor is doing far more than we could honestly and consciously expect any visitor to have to do. And yet they can sit at the corner of Route 7 and Bay Road and wonder where's the lake.
Yeah, I think there are a number of very practical small things that we can do based just on the information that I got last night and then at a prior SBPA meeting. One common concern is that people want to come into the village, but they can't find a place to park. That's a problem, and there's lots of things we can do, particularly when the library is done, offer the municipal lot as an obvious place to park, and other places. So that's one problem that I think we can address and should address. And then the other thing that came up last night, Gail, what was her name? Wendy from the governor's tourism office?
Wendy Knight, and she is the tourism commissioner of the state. That was Wendy Knight, and she's state tourism commissioner.
Right.
And she also has a lot of statistics on the impact of tourism upon economic development here in town that I can share with you.
The economic multiplier.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she also has a wealth of information about grants that we can get and that kind of thing. The governor is really very enthusiastic about recreation. So there's a governor's commission on recreation that has money to give out for grants and that kind of thing. One of the problems we have is we have this one little jewel in Shelburne that I learned last night for the first time is for Shelburne residents only, and that's the beach.
Oh, you never knew that?
No. And so, and that's by deed. We can't change that. We have to, because for a minute I thought, oh, wouldn't that be a great place for a lot of recreation, and then it's limited to Shelburne residents. But you could do some recreation down at the bay. And then if, when it comes time to replace the bridge and perhaps we can tackle that Bay Road area, it's an obvious great place for a bike loop if we could get it going. Those kinds of things I think wouldn't be well, the bike loop would be costly, but there are lots of little things I think that if we brainstorm, we can come up with as agenda items. Sorry, I'm taking you off task.
No. I'm ready to say, how about we do this? Because these three starter problems, call them, are suggestions from me. There are many others, many. And I'm not trying to establish a priority immediately at the start, but they seem to me exemplary of areas that we should be looking at carefully. How about we blend 1 and 2, Mike, and set the date for August 1, and give Lee and I until the next meeting to come back, Lee, with a suggestion of how that is organized, who's involved, what we may anticipate as a round table. We can talk to Gail and Roz and others in the association and come back with a kind of a plan of how to get that going. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I think I shared this with a couple of you. I'm a little hesitant about committees and adding another committee. I think,
Yes, I am too.
you are for staffing reasons, and I think there can be committee fatigue, and we're already asking a lot of volunteers as it is. So I think, in my mind, less is more with this in some ways. It's not going to all come from us pushing this. A lot of it has to come from different folks and stakeholders in town who are pulling. So I would just caution us against forming committees here and trying to think a little bit differently about how we go after this.
I was just, I felt pleased rereading the plan again to note that was their recommendation, to put a committee together to deal.
Perhaps they
Gail
can
has
staff.
a comment.
Gail, John, you had one first, Gail, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think that the truth of the matter is, in development terms, Shelburne has a reputation for being difficult to deal with. And I can give you one example. I happened to be at a DRB meeting about 5 or 7 years ago, and the guy who owned the Mouldering Hotel at the junction of Bay Road and 7, everybody with me? He was there with his lawyer, and he wanted to get permission to put in a convenience store gas station on that junction. And he wanted access to Route 7. And they said flat out no. And so that's 7 years ago, and the site still sits empty as an eyesore.
Thank you, John. Gail?
I just wanted to speak a little bit to Jamie's point of about committees, and while I totally relate to the whole idea of sort of committee overload, there's also, and I think when Mike had his philosophy night the other night, there was a lot of conversation about why people don't get engaged in town, and I think that avoiding silos and encouraging participation, however we do it, whether it's through meetings and encouraging people to share their ideas, is going to be something very important, and not to have committees, because people don't come out to committee meetings. It's unusual, only as in the last year or so, as we've sort of changed administration, that we get this many people coming to meetings because they're truly interested and not simply naysayers. So I wouldn't want to see us discourage that kind of participation.
I agree. I mean, we mentioned the form-based code, the Route 7 corridor charrette that was done. The library charrette was very successful. So I think those short little bursts of whiteboarding and lightning talks are just more effective for this initiative.
Can you just then drop down to a suggestion number 3? Go straight to charrette?
Well, the only thing about 3, Mary, is it extends it in time if we're gonna think seriously about any budget impact. And I don't know where the money's going to come from. I graded it out in terms of homegrown through professional consultation, and I don't know that we've got the money to
Did we
engage
look at that?
professional consultancy. We can look at that.
Well, we can look. I mean, I've got some ideas that I'd be happy to
Yeah.
present to you
Yeah,
from past experience that worked really well.
yeah. I mean, if anything, my bias is to get going. I think we know enough, and I think it's time to get the help of those who are in, sort of on the front line and move forward, so. Any other discussion with that? Colleen? Colleen's,
Nope, I'm here.
okay,
No, I'm just
so,
listening. I mean, to be honest, like I agree with Jamie about the committee fatigue, and I think if we had like a clear charge to give, then it makes a little bit more sense. But we're still trying to delineate exactly where we want it to go. And you know, and I've seen this now over 5 years, like actually the beginning of the conversation about economic development, and at least Ann Hogan coming in and presenting the survey, and you know, like this has been a progression, and it's nice to see the fact that we're having more organized discussions about it. So, you know, it'll be nice to see how this just organically develops over the next few meetings. I don't think anything's off the table.
okay, so Lee and I'll come back to you. I don't know that how much formal action, it's a policy. Maybe we'll even make an attempt at a policy statement. I think that would be appropriate as a starter. And we'll come back to you. The energy's a different,
Energy is
it's a
different.
different
I mean,
matter.
they're
Yeah, there's an existing
two sides of
structure.
the same
Yeah,
coin.
there's
If
an
we're
existing
saving money
structure.
with energy conservation, we can redeploy those funds towards
Yeah.
Yeah.
other things.
Yeah.
So it all
Yeah, so,
works
okay?
together.
Yeah.
Gang, any discussion? Any other? You think we'll get Andy Cat to join that? No. We can't go for two? You're saying one's enough, you know? Okay, any other commentary? Hearing none, thank you, everybody. The next item is to consider entering executive session to discuss contract negotiations regarding a purchase and sales agreement for the prospective fire rescue portion of the Rice Lumber Healthy Living property.
Let's see. Pursuant to 1 VSA 313, I move to find that premature general public knowledge of the town's contract negotiations regarding a purchase and sales agreement for the prospective fire rescue portion of the Rice Lumber Healthy Living property would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Moved by Jamie, seconded by Mary. Any discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Does that include you, Colleen?
I said aye.
Okay. Pursuant to 1 VSA 313, I move to enter executive session to discuss the town's contract negotiations regarding a purchase and sales agreement for the prospective fire rescue portion of the Rice Lumber Healthy Living property.
Second.
And
Seconded.
and to invite the town manager to participate.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved by Jamie, seconded by Mary. Any discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And Colleen's okay with it? Thank you.
Colleen, we'll call you back shortly.
Colleen is off the phone. Is there a motion to exit executive session and resume general session?
So moved?
So moved by Mary,
Second.
seconded by Jamie. Any discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. That's unanimous. Now, the next item is to convene convene ourselves as a liquor
I
commission.
think we wanted to give one brief update to the public
Quick
on.
update on the
Do you want to make a statement?
Just
I think
Okay.
that'd be helpful,
Yeah.
thanks. So we've been, as everyone knows, we've been working on a purchase and sale agreement for the prospective fire rescue property. We have agreement on form and content of that agreement, but we don't have all the exhibits yet, so it's not quite in a form ready to sign. We anticipate having those exhibits in hand and being able to sign this at our next meeting on April 9. And just to be clear again, as we've said before, it's a little bit of a different purchase and sale agreement than typical because it's still cannot commit the town to actually buying the property. We know we need to go through another town meeting vote if the site suitability analysis works. So I just want to be clear that signing this isn't committing us to anything other than what we've already
Those are all
agreed
conditions
to
to
do.
closing and any funding. You know, the vote, there are a number of other conditions that are identified in the agreement.
And this was as described in the warrant article and
Correct.
town vote. So we're taking no formal action.
But
Tonight.
we hope
Tonight.
we will sign it next meeting when we have all the exhibits in hand. But we have agreement on the form and content of the agreement. Thanks.
We look forward to seeing you all back at some near future point. Tell us how it's going and what's happening, and thanks, guys. We're sorry you have to wait so long. Now, we will convene ourselves as a liquor commission on a motion and vote to consider a liquor license, correct? Just one?
Correct.
Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Mary moves to convene ourselves as a liquor commission. Mike seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And
Aye.
those opposed, nay. It's unanimous.
So the one before us this evening is for Spillane's Service Center, the gas station on the corner. It's for a second-class license to sell.
Beer and wine.
And if the board is so,
The police chief has
Inclined.
vetted, and
we're not aware of any issues or concerns with the operation as it's existed.
Is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Mary moves to approve the license.
Second.
Mike seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, nay. It's unanimous.
And if you'd each be so kind.
Any other licenses to?
I believe there are 2 still outstanding, and I know the town clerk makes every effort to remind establishments of the May 1 deadline for these.
How long is a license, Lee?
They're annual, so under state statutes, we go through this process every spring.
They're actually issued by the state.
Yeah, it's a curious
But
process,
They're a step in the process.
because even if this board voted to disapprove, the liquor commission, the state can still approve it, and I've been involved in cases like that.
And there are varying degrees depending upon whether it's just wine, beer, or sit-down drinks, or outside drinks, and so on and so forth. Is there a motion to resume general session?
So moved.
Moved by Mary,
Second.
seconded by Jamie. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. It's unanimous. And following that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved by Mary, seconded by Jamie. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you
Tom.
all.
Thank you, Sarah.